I hid my best friend's affair, told my sister to get over losing her husband, then invited the couple to my wedding. My sister told everyone the truth, pulled my flower girl, and watched my wedding burn down. I was standing at the altar in a $4,200 dress when my sister walked out. Not stormed out. Not screamed. She just stood up from the third pew, took my 7-year-old niece by the hand, and walked down the side aisle like she had somewhere better to be. And the worst part, the part that I will spend the rest of my life replaying, is that I knew exactly why she did it. I had known for 2 years. I had just told myself it wouldn't matter. That she would eventually get over it. That love, my wedding, my happiness, was bigger than what she had lost. I was wrong about every single thing. Let me back up. Because the story doesn't start at the altar. It starts 18 months before that, in a hotel bar in Nashville, when my best friend Cassandra told me she had been sleeping with my sister's husband for 6 months and asked me to keep her secret. I said yes. I said yes without thinking. I said yes because Cassandra was my person, my maid of honor, my college roommate, the woman who held my hair back and drove me to urgent care and talked me down from 100 ledges over 15 years of friendship. I said yes because she was crying and I was on my second whiskey sour and she made it sound so complicated, so nuanced, so human. She told me her own marriage was dead. She told me Thomas, my sister Renata's husband, had been unhappy for years. She told me they hadn't meant for it to happen. She used the word soulmates and I let her. I sat there and let my best friend use the word soulmates to describe what she was doing to my sister's marriage, to my niece Imani's family, and I nodded like she was telling me about a rom-com plot instead of a detonation. Renata had no idea. Renata, who was 34 and beautiful and had spent the last 6 years building a life with Thomas, a home, a daughter, a future, had absolutely no idea that her husband was in love with her older sister's best friend. And I knew. I sat on that information for 6 months before everything collapsed. 6 months of Sunday dinners where I watched Thomas pass the breadbasket to my sister and felt my stomach turn. 6 months of Renata texting me that something felt off with Thomas, that he seemed distant, that she was worried. 6 months of me saying, marriages go through phases, girl. He loves you. Stop spiraling. I told my sister to stop spiraling while I was actively protecting the person blowing up her life. When it finally came out, it came out ugly. The way these things always do. Thomas left. Not just Renata, but the house, the custody arrangement they had barely negotiated, half of Imani's childhood. He moved into an apartment and Cassandra left her own husband 3 weeks later and they were together, publicly, within 2 months. And Renata found out, through mutual friends because of course she did, that I had known. That her big sister had known for 6 months and looked her in the eyes every single week and said nothing. She called me and I answered because I thought I could explain it. I thought if I just laid it out, the loyalty, the complexity, the impossible position I had been put in, she would understand. Or at least soften. I was so sure I could make her see my side that I had actually rehearsed it. I had talking points. I genuinely sat in my apartment and thought through how to present the case for why keeping my best friend's secret had been the reasonable choice. Renata didn't yell. That was the thing that undid me. She didn't cry or throw anything or call me names. She just said, very quietly, you chose her over me. You chose her over Imani. And I need you to sit with that. Then she hung up. I told myself she was being dramatic. I told myself she would come around. I called her twice that week and when she didn't answer, I sent a long text that I now recognize as the most self-serving piece of writing I have ever produced. I talked about how hard it had been for me. I used the phrase I was put in an impossible situation 4 times. I said I hoped she could find it in her heart to understand. Not once did I say I was sorry for what she had actually lost. Not once did I say Cassandra had been wrong. Not once did I say I had been wrong. I was so focused on not losing Cassandra, I had already let myself lose Renata. Here is what I told myself during those months. I told myself that Thomas and Renata had problems long before Cassandra. I told myself that if their marriage had been strong, it couldn't have been broken from the outside. I told myself that Renata was angry and hurt and processing, that grief makes people irrational, that she would eventually separate the affair from my role in it and forgive me. I told myself that friendship of 15 years meant something, that protecting Cassandra had been an act of loyalty and love, that a good friend doesn't abandon you when you're at your worst. I wrapped myself in every comfortable lie available and called it perspective. I did not think about Imani. I did not let myself think about what it meant for a 6-year-old to suddenly have 2 bedrooms and a mother who cried in the car and a father who had a new girlfriend. I did not think about the fact that Renata now had to navigate co-parenting with a man who had destroyed her, while that man's girlfriend was someone she had known for years through me. I did not think about any of that because thinking about it would have required me to admit that my silence had contributed to it. Then I got engaged. Gabriel proposed on a Tuesday in October, On the roof of the restaurant where we'd had our first date, and it was genuinely the happiest moment of my life. I called my mother first, then Cassandra, then my 2 other close friends. I texted Renata. She sent back a heart emoji. That was it. 1 heart emoji after 8 months of near silence, and I told myself that was progress. I told myself she was coming back around. The engagement changed something in me. Or I thought it did. I was planning this wedding and I wanted it to be everything, the kind of day that wipes the slate clean and reminds everyone what matters. I wanted Cassandra there, obviously. She was my maid of honor. She had been my maid of honor in my head since we were 22. And by then she and Thomas were serious, they'd been together almost a year, they were talking about moving in together. Inviting Cassandra meant inviting Thomas. And inviting Thomas meant my sister would have to sit in the same room as the man who had left her and the woman who had helped take him. I called Renata to tell her before the invitations went out. I want credit for that, even though I don't deserve any. I called her, and I explained that Cassandra was my maid of honor, that I couldn't imagine the day without her, that I knew it would be hard but I hoped Renata could find a way to be there too, because I loved her and I wanted her at my wedding. I said I was sure we could all be adults about it. Adults about it? I used that phrase with my sister who had spent the last year rebuilding her entire life from ash. Renata was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You're asking me to watch the woman who slept with my husband stand up at your altar." I said, "Cass is important to me and I can't cut her out of my wedding." Renata said, "I understand." And she hung up. I thought that meant she was coming. I thought the civility meant acceptance. I sent her an invitation. I put her daughter, my niece Imani, in the flower girl lineup because I thought it would be a peace offering, a way of saying Imani still matters, this family still matters. I didn't ask Renata first. I just sent the invitation with Imani listed as flower girl and assumed that was a gesture she would appreciate. The RSVP came back for Renata +1. I told Gabriel it was progress. The weeks before the wedding were a blur of fittings and tastings and rehearsal dinners and the whole glittering machinery of a wedding that costs more than a car. Cassandra was extraordinary. She threw me a bridal shower, organized the bachelorette, handled vendors when I was overwhelmed, showed up with wine when I had a breakdown over the centerpieces. She was everything a maid of honor is supposed to be and I loved her for it, and I did not let myself think about the fact that she was living with the man who used to sit across from my sister at Christmas dinner. The night before the wedding, Renata texted me. Just 1 line. "I need you to know that I love you. I also need you to know that I've made a decision and I'm at peace with it." I read it 3 times and told myself it was sweet. That she was reaching out because she was emotional. That she was saying she had found peace with everything. I went to sleep feeling like things might actually be okay. They were not okay. The wedding was at 2 in the afternoon at a venue we had booked 18 months out. Gabriel's family filled the left side, my family and friends on the right. Cassandra looked stunning in the dusty rose bridesmaid dress, standing just off my shoulder at the altar. Thomas was somewhere in the 4th or 5th row. I had specifically, deliberately not made eye contact with that section during the processional because I didn't want to see my sister's face when Cassandra walked down the aisle. Imani walked down the aisle first, in her white dress with the ribbon sash dropping petals, and she was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I started crying before I even reached Gabriel. Real tears, not wedding day performance. Because I loved that little girl. I have always loved her. And something about seeing her there, doing that, felt like proof that everything was going to be fine. It was not fine. The officiant was 3 minutes into the ceremony, we had just finished the welcome, when I heard the movement. Not loud. Not chaotic. Just a soft sound of fabric and feet, and when I looked to my right I saw Renata stand up from the 3rd pew. She took Imani's hand, gently, so gently, the way you hold a child when you don't want to alarm them. Imani still had the flower basket. She looked up at her mother and then back at me, confused, and I watched my sister walk her daughter out of my wedding. The room went still in that particular way that means everyone noticed. The officiant paused. Gabriel's hand tightened on mine. I heard someone whisper. I heard someone else say something I couldn't make out. And then I heard Cassandra, just behind me, exhale very slowly, and I knew in my entire body, that something was about to happen. Renata stopped at the end of the aisle. She turned around to face the room. And she spoke. Not loudly. But clearly enough that the venue, which sat about 140 people, heard every word. She said, "I love my sister. I am not here to ruin her day. But I cannot watch this woman stand at this altar as a maid of honor. This woman spent 6 months hiding the fact that she was sleeping with my husband. My ex-husband, who is sitting in this room today. I found out about the affair through strangers. I found out my sister knew from strangers too. I've spent a year being told to get over it, to be an adult, to be happy for everyone else. I've done my best. But I can't stand here and pretend. I'm sorry, Gabriel. I'm sorry to everyone else. Congratulations. Then she walked out. And the silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard. I stood at that altar and I could not move. I could not speak. I could feel Gabriel's hand still holding mine, but I couldn't look at him because I knew what I would find. I could hear the murmur moving through the room like a wave. I could feel Cassandra's presence behind me like a lit match. And I understood, in a way I had been refusing to understand for 2 years, that there was no version of this that ended well for me. There was no coming back from this. Not at the altar. Not today. The officiant looked at Gabriel and asked quietly if he wanted to continue. Gabriel looked at me. And the look on his face was not anger. It was worse than anger. It was a look of a man trying very hard to figure out if he knows who he is standing next to. He said, very quietly, "Did you know about the affair?" And I couldn't lie. I had been lying for 2 years and I was so tired of it, and also I knew he would find out either way. The whole room had just heard Renata's version, and so I said, yes. He dropped my hand. He didn't leave. Not right then. He stood there and asked the officiant to give us a moment, and we went into the side room off the main hall, and he asked me to tell him everything. And I did. I told him everything: the Nashville bar, the 6 months, the calls with Renata, the invitation, all of it. I told him the whole story for the first time out loud to someone who had actually deserved to know it, and when I was done he sat with it for a long time, and then he said, "You let your niece be a flower girl to keep the peace and never once thought about what it would do to her to be pulled out in front of everyone." That one landed differently than anything else. Because he was right. I had used Imani as a prop in my peacekeeping performance without once thinking about her experience. She was 7 years old and she had just been walked out of her aunt's wedding in a flower girl dress, and she was going to carry that image somewhere in her body for a very long time. We did not get married that day. The venue had a cancellation policy. We lost most of the deposit. The catering still got paid because the food was already made, so 140 people who came to watch me get married instead ate a very nice plated dinner while Gabriel and I sat in separate cars in the parking lot. I know this because my cousin Brianna texted me updates. People ate. People drank the open bar. Some of Gabriel's cousins apparently had a genuinely good time. The DJ played the reception playlist anyway because no one told him not to. I sat in my car in a $4,200 dress and ate nothing. Gabriel and I did not break up that night. We went home separately and we talked for 4 more weeks, long ugly talks that went in circles, and then we broke up. It wasn't dramatic. There was no final explosion. He just said he needed to be with someone whose instinct, when faced with a hard choice, was to protect the people who were being hurt, not the people doing the hurting. He said he wasn't sure that was me. He said he needed time, and that time became permanent, and I understood, the way you understand something that you also cannot accept. I lost Gabriel. Not to anger. To disappointment. Which is somehow worse. The fallout happened in stages. First came the immediate aftermath, the calls and the texts and the social media. People who had been at the wedding talked. Of course they talked. Within 48 hours the story had reached people who hadn't been there, a distorted game of telephone where some details were exaggerated and some were accurate, and all of it made me sound like the villain of someone else's story. The comments were brutal in the way that online pylons always are, and I made the catastrophic mistake of reading them. I read every single one. I don't know why I did that. Some kind of punishment instinct, some part of me that knew I deserved it and kept opening tabs anyway. People I had known for years went quiet. Not unfriended, just quiet. The kind of quiet that means they're watching but have decided not to be associated with whatever this is. My college group chat, which had been active for a decade, basically died after the wedding. A few people reached out privately to ask what had happened, and when I told them, they said things like, "That's a really tough situation," in the tone people use when they think you're wrong but don't want to fight. One of my closest friends from work told me directly that she thought I had handled everything badly and she needed some space. She has not closed that space in the 10 months since. Cassandra disappeared. Not immediately. She called me the night of the failed wedding and she was sorry. She said she felt terrible, she hadn't expected Renata to do that. I remember sitting on my bathroom floor in the dress I still hadn't taken off and listening to her apologize for my sister's reaction to her affair and thinking something had shifted in my brain. Some essential load-bearing wall had come down. I said almost nothing. She asked if I was okay and I said I didn't know, and she said she'd call tomorrow. She did not call tomorrow. She texted once, 3 days later, to say she was giving me space to process. A week after that she posted something on Instagram about focusing on her circle, cutting out toxic energy, protecting her peace. I was never mentioned. I never will be. She had moved all the way through guilt into self-protection before I had even finished crying, and I don't know why I was surprised by that. I had watched her do the same thing to her own husband, to my sister, to an entire marriage. I had watched her prioritize her own peace over everyone else's wreckage and called it complicated and nuanced and human. It was still all those things. It was also just who she was. She has not reached out since. The friendship of 15 years ended in a text about protecting her peace, and I did not even get the dignity of a conversation. I tried to call Renata twice in the weeks after the wedding. The first time it went to voicemail. The second time she picked up and said, very calmly, that she needed me not to contact her for a while, that she was working through things with her therapist and she wasn't ready. I said I was sorry, a real sorry, not a self-serving one, I hope. I said it out loud for the first time with nothing attached to it, no explanation, no but, just I am sorry for what I did to you. She said she heard me. Then she said goodbye. I have not spoken to her since. That was 8 months ago. Imani's birthday was in the spring. I sent a card and a gift. The gift was returned. Not with a note. Just the box, my handwriting crossed out, return to sender. I sat with that box on my kitchen table for 3 days before I could put it away. I moved out of my apartment. The lease was up in March and Gabriel and I had been planning to move in together after the wedding, and when that didn't happen the apartment felt like a museum of a future that no longer existed. I moved into a smaller place in a neighborhood I didn't know well, and I started over with furniture I bought at a consignment shop and a kitchen that smelled like the previous tenant's candles. It wasn't bad. It was just very, very quiet. My mother called me every Sunday for a while, which was its own kind of tenderness and its own kind of torture. She didn't take sides out loud. She said she loved both of her daughters. She said families go through things. She said she hoped Renata and I could find our way back. But there was something careful in her voice, a practiced neutrality that told me she knew more than she was saying. I finally asked her directly, about 4 months in, what she thought I had done wrong. She was quiet for a long time and then she said, "You forgot that you were Renata's sister before you were Cassandra's friend." And that was the most honest thing anyone had said to me. I cried for 2 hours after I hung up. I have gone over the decision so many times. I have sat in my own apartment, in the silence that is now my primary companion, and walked myself through each fork in the road. The moment in Nashville when I could have said, "Cassandra, I love you but I can't keep this secret from my sister." The months of phone calls with Renata where I could have told her the truth. The engagement, the guest list, the moment I could have called Cassandra and said, "I can't have both of you at this wedding without it being a disaster. I have to choose." The moment I could have chosen my sister. There were so many moments I could have chosen my sister. I keep thinking about a specific conversation, about 8 months before the wedding, when Renata and I had a rare good call. Imani had done something funny at school, I can't even remember what, and Renata was laughing telling me about it, and for about 20 minutes we were just sisters again, easy and warm and the way we always used to be. I remember thinking during that call, this is still there. We can get back to this. And then I hung up and texted Cassandra about bridesmaid dress options and did not once connect those two facts. Did not once think that getting back to that ease with my sister required me to do anything other than wait. I was so passive about the things that mattered. So active about the things that didn't. There is a particular kind of shame that doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't feel like a wave or a breakdown. It's more like a low-grade fever that you can't shake, a constant background awareness that the gap between who you thought you were and who you actually were is larger than you accounted for. I thought I was a loyal friend. And I was, just to the wrong person. I thought I was a loving sister. And I was, just not enough. Not when it counted. I thought I was the kind of woman who showed up for the people she loved, and I did show up. I just showed up for the people whose love came without cost, without difficulty, without asking anything of me. Renata needed something hard from me. She needed me to risk a friendship, to have a painful conversation, to choose her when choosing her was uncomfortable. And I couldn't do it. I dressed it up in words like loyalty and complexity and impossible position, but the truth was simpler than that. The truth was that I was afraid of losing Cassandra and I was not equally afraid of losing Renata. I had taken my sister for granted in the deepest possible way. I had assumed her love was unconditional in a way I never assumed Cassandra's was. I was right about Cassandra. I was catastrophically wrong about Renata. I went back to therapy. Not for the first time, but for the first time with a problem I couldn't talk around. I sat in my therapist's office and told her everything, starting with Nashville, and she listened and asked questions and never told me I was a bad person, which was almost more difficult than if she had. I wanted someone to assign me a category. Villain, bad friend, bad sister, selfish woman who deserved everything she got. That would have been cleaner. Instead she kept asking me what I had been afraid of and I kept having to answer honestly, and the answers were all small and embarrassing. I was afraid of conflict. I was afraid of Cassandra's disappointment. I was afraid that if I told Renata the truth and the marriage ended anyway, I would have blown up the friendship for nothing. I was afraid that being honest would cost me more than staying quiet. Everything I was afraid of losing, I lost anyway. I just made sure Renata lost things first. Gabriel moved on faster than I expected, which is not a criticism of him, it's just a fact that I had to absorb. I found out through mutual friends because we live in the same city and run in overlapping circles. He started seeing someone about 5 months after we ended things. I don't know anything about her except that she exists and that Gabriel is, by all accounts, doing well. I am glad, genuinely, even though that gladness sits next to something rawer that I don't have a clean word for. I think I expected him to struggle more. I think I expected my absence to leave a more visible mark. It's a strange thing to grieve, the discovery that someone's life continued without you in a way that looks functional and whole. My own life has continued too. It just doesn't look the way I thought it would. I am 36 and I am starting over in a way that feels less like a fresh start and more like a reckoning. I have a job I still go to and friends who are still in my life, a smaller circle than I had before, more honestly assembled. I have my parents. I have my own apartment with its consignment furniture and its second-hand quiet. I have a body that goes through the motions and a mind that is slowly, very slowly, working out what kind of person I want to be. I do not have my sister. I do not have Gabriel. I do not have Cassandra, which I know is supposed to feel like the smallest of those losses, but some days it doesn't. Some days I still reach for my phone to tell her something and then remember. I miss her in the way that you miss someone who is real to you, and the grief doesn't cancel the betrayal, it just sits next to it. I do not have Imani. This is the one that closes around me like a hand at the throat. I missed her 8th birthday. I will probably miss her 9th. She is growing up and I am not in it, and I put myself outside it through a sequence of choices that felt small at the time and were not small. She wore a flower girl dress and held a basket of petals and was walked out of a wedding before the vows started, and she is 8 years old and she is going to be carrying that somewhere for a long time. I did that. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but I contributed to it through 2 years of looking away from the things I didn't want to see. People ask me, sometimes, what I would do differently. I never know how to answer because the honest answer is everything and that answer is too large to be useful. I would have walked out of that Nashville bar and called my sister. That's it. That's the whole thing. One phone call, one hard conversation, one moment of choosing the person who had no leverage over me instead of the person who did. One moment of remembering that love without cost isn't really love, it's just comfort. Renata has not reached out. I do not expect her to. She is rebuilding her life with the patience of someone who learned, the hard way, that she can only rely on herself. I think about her more than I think she knows. I think about who she is becoming without me in her corner, and I think she is probably becoming someone stronger than she would have been if I had protected her the way a sister should. That's a terrible thing to know about yourself, that your absence might actually be part of someone's growth. I am still working on being honest. I am better at it now, the way you get better at anything that humiliated you once. I am slower to make promises I'm not willing to keep. I am faster to say hard things to people I love. I'm trying to be the person who, when put in an impossible situation, makes the choice that she can live with in 10 years, not the choice that gets her through the next 10 minutes. I don't know if I'll get to tell Renata any of this. I hope someday I do. I hope someday she lets me sit across from her and tell her, without any agenda, without any self-protection, that she deserved better from me and I am sorry, and I know that sorry doesn't close the distance. I hope she's happy. I hope Imani is thriving. I hope Thomas is a decent father even if he was a terrible husband. I hope Cassandra is happy too, because hating her doesn't get me anything and because I loved her for 15 years and that was real even when she wasn't. I am writing this because I need to say it somewhere. Because I have spent 10 months editing this story in my head, looking for angles, looking for places where I was the reasonable one, and I have finally stopped finding them. The story is what it is. I had a choice, over and over again, for 2 years. And I made the wrong one every single time. If your person, your best friend or your closest confidant or the person you'd do anything for, comes to you and says they are hurting someone you love, and asks you to help them hide it, and you say yes, understand that you are not being a good friend. You are being a participant. You are handing them a shovel and standing at the edge of someone else's grave and calling it loyalty. And the people who get buried will eventually climb out. And they will remember who watched. My niece put flower petals in a basket and rehearsed her walk for 2 weeks and was taken out of a wedding before it started. She is 8 years old. She didn't do anything wrong. Neither did Renata. Neither did Gabriel. I was the only one in this story who made a choice. I made it 18 months before the wedding, in a hotel bar in Nashville, when someone I loved asked me to look away, and I did. The dress is in a garment bag in the back of my closet. I have not decided what to do with it yet. Some days I think about donating it. Some days I think about how it cost more than 3 months of my new rent. Most days I just don't look at it and tell myself I'll figure it out later. That's probably the most honest thing I've said in this whole story. I keep telling myself I'll figure it out later. And later keeps moving, and the dress stays in the bag, and my sister's number sits in my phone like a door I don't know how to open, and Imani is somewhere turning 8 into 9 without me, and I am sitting in a quiet apartment that smells like someone else's candles, and I am finally, fully, too late understanding that some doors don't stay open just because you eventually decide you want to walk through them.